This month, two more characters for Street Fighter V were released, the returning Oro and the highly anticipated debut of Akira. And with that, Street Fighter V takes one step closer to pulling into port and docking for good. There's only one more character left, and that has people speculating about the future. When are we going to get Street Fighter VI? And more importantly, what exactly is it going to be? And I'm no different. I have had many thoughts about the future of the series, especially after Street Fighter V was, let's just say, a series of peaks and valleys. It certainly had its positives and its high points, but sometimes it was rough reaching those. And I've been wanting to cover my thoughts on this next installment for a while, and we do have a show on this channel called Build the Roster, where we take a hypothetical fighting game and build our dream roster around it, and I've actually received multiple requests to do an episode of that show focusing on Street Fighter VI. But just didn't feel right to me. No, you see, I've got a lot of thoughts on what I'd like to see in the new Street Fighter, and the roster is only a small part of that. In fact, my thoughts on the roster of the new Street Fighter game kind of relies pretty heavily on where the rest of the game would go. And that's what I really want to talk about, because so far Street Fighter V's final season of DLC has given us some hints as to what they have planned for Street Fighter VI, and holy cow, I am very worried about Street Fighter VI. So I decide, you know what, if we're going to tackle this game, let's dive deep into it. So welcome everyone to a brand new show, a big grand experiment on a channel that is pretty much nothing but big grand experiments. This is Let's Make a Sequel, where we take a game and break down exactly where we want the next installment to go. Think of it as one part mechanical and structural analysis, one part wild off-the-wall fan fiction. So join me, won't you, as we look to the future of Street Fighter, and as you will soon discover, I mean that quite literally. So where do we begin with the monumental task of building Street Fighter VI? Well, the same place any good game begins. The premise. Yes, before we get to the mechanics, before we can get into the modes, before we can get to the roster, we have to actually figure out what the heck is this game going to be about? And as I mentioned, the final season of DLC has already given us some hints as to where they plan on going with the next game, so let's start there. In Rose's story, she encounters the character G, this bizarre new addition to the Street Fighter universe who appeared in the third season of DLC, and using her mystic power, she is able to tell that G is the herald of something dark. Some sinister force that is a greater threat than anything they have ever faced. At the end of her story, she says that it is too late to stop what's coming. So, her only hope now is to use her powers to send her spirit back through time so that it can rewrite history to undo all of this. Mentioning going back to zero, and for anyone who doesn't know, Street Fighter Alpha, a game that was set between the events of Street Fighter 1 and Street Fighter 2, was known in Japan as Street Fighter Zero, and this was when Rose made her first appearance. So yes, it looks like what Capcom has planned for the next Street Fighter is a time travel reboot of the entire series, and I am begging you for the love of all that is good, please do not do that! I remember when I saw this setup in Rose's story, my stomach sank because I cannot think of anything I would want less for the future of this series. Street Fighter has had a problem for a while now, which is that it's afraid to move ahead. And I understand why they're nervous. The last time they tried to move onto a new generation and push these characters and their universe forward was Street Fighter 3. And over time, Street Fighter 3 Third Strike went on to be considered one of the best fighting games of all time. But it wasn't considered that when it came out. No, when Street Fighter 3 was originally released, it massively underperformed for Capcom. This was one of those games that took a while to build up its fan base and prove to the world how good it was. And I've said it many times before, but Capcom is almost superstitious with its business decisions, because if something doesn't work once, they won't stop to ask, what can we learn from this? Let's examine every angle of this and really pick apart the pros and cons and see if maybe it didn't work then, but could work now, and what could we do different with this? No, if something underperforms, they will shove it in a room, chain up the doors, and throw away the keys. Unless it's a Resident Evil multiplayer game, then for some reason those will fail 4 times in a row and they'll keep making them. Point is, even though Street Fighter 3 came out 2 decades ago, and as I said, people have now come to love that game, Capcom is still paranoid of trying something like that again. That's why when Street Fighter 4 came out, it didn't just bring back all of the classic World Warriors, they also set the game after Street Fighter 2 and before Street Fighter 3 because, whoa, progressing the timeline, that's scary. We're going to stay in the past where it's safe. But that's understandable. They did need to win everyone back after years of no fighting games, so to have a game load with Street Fighter 2 nostalgia just made sense. That's fine. What is far less fine is that then we got Street Fighter 5, which was also set before the events of Street Fighter 3. Capcom was going to push against the tides of time with everything they had. Street Fighter 4 being set between 2 and 3 made it feel like Street Fighter 2.5, which made Street Fighter 5 feel like Street Fighter 2 3/4. But the story mode of 5 ends with Bison finally being defeated for good, and the big boss of 3, Gil, being set up, meaning now we had everything we needed to link Street Fighter 2 to Street Fighter 3. There is zero wiggle room left. If you are going to make a new Street Fighter, you have to progress the story. Or you can grab the time travel parachute and pull the ripcord like your quarterly sales report depends on it. Yeah, as I said, I'm not really on board with this idea, and to make matters worse, Mortal Kombat already did this. And when I say this, I mean literally this. The person with magical powers sends a message to themselves right at the beginning of the series to change the past. This is such a copy and paste, I'm almost wondering if NetherRealm's lawyers are preemptively gearing up. Plus, when Mortal Kombat did this, they at least had a reason. Not only had one of the creators of Mortal Kombat left, meaning now would be a good time to start things fresh, but also, the last Mortal Kombat game was literally called Armageddon, because it was the destruction of everything. It was all the characters coming back to kill each other until only one of them was left. Yeah, where do you go from there? To the DC Universe, of course! Which is another reason that they had to reboot the franchise. People didn't really care for Mortal Kombat Armageddon, and they kind of hated Mortal Kombat vs. DC Universe. So the Mortal Kombat brand was growing stale. They had to refresh it. But Street Fighter? The only thing that's getting stale about Street Fighter is sticking to the same one period over and over again. So now for Street Fighter 6, you want to time travel back to the beginning of that period? Now, I'm sure there are some people out there who think this is a cool idea. I'm sure that there are people out there who don't want to move beyond 3 and they want to stick to the story and the characters that we already know. Or heck, there are probably some people out there who are excited about this idea because they want to see how they could change the story. But for me, this would be the ultimate we got nothing moment from Capcom, and I cannot stress how much I don't want to see the same things again and again. I do not want to see the World Warriors have to stop Bison for the 4th time. I do not want to see Ryu for 20 more years have to combat the Satsui no Hado. I don't want to see Cammy be a brainwash assassin again. I am so done with all those plot lines. And honestly, I think most other Street Fighter fans are done with them as well. I think people are finally ready to move on to the next part of the Street Fighter story. Now, I should mention that there is another hint of things to come for Street Fighter's future. At the time of this recording, he has yet to be released, but Capcom has revealed the final character for Street Fighter V will be a brand new character named Luke, and they say he is very important to the future of Street Fighter. Okay, now this is kind of confusing because Rose is talking about going into the past, but then they're showing off this guy who they say is important to the future. If I had to take a guess, I think Capcom is essentially trying to play it safe by setting up multiple possibilities for the next game. In case you guys haven't heard, according to some leaks coming out of Capcom, they've apparently been working on Street Fighter 6 for multiple years, but so far every build of the game has been met with negative reception within the company, which all led to the head of their fighting games division being forced to resign. So, in other words, we're probably getting mixed ideas on where Capcom is taking this franchise, because Capcom probably has mixed ideas on where they're taking this franchise. But yes, we did get treated to a look at Luke, who they say is important to the future, and that is an interesting phrase. They kept mentioning the future, and that combined with a couple of other visual elements, such as the way that the stars appear and the way the flame burst in there at the beginning of his trailer, have caused some people to form theories that this character might not be the new star of Street Fighter 6, but he actually might be a young Captain Commando, since his game is set in a future Metro City, which is a city that exists within the Street Fighter universe. I know it's a bit of a stretch, but this is the very same game where they revealed that Street Fighter is actually set in the past of the Strider Hiryu games. It's really starting to feel like Capcom is just taking every franchise they don't know what to do with and they're just shoving them in Street Fighter. Mark my words, we were one extra season of DLC away from getting Beautiful Joe in this game. But even if everyone is wrong about Luke possibly being a future Captain Commando and he is going to be the new star of Street Fighter and they are going to move the story ahead, I gotta admit, Luke isn't winning me over just yet. I mean, okay, I actually think his playstyle looks interesting. It's super aggressive and very unga-bunga, which, speaking personally, does kind of match my inability to stop hitting buttons. And I don't even have a problem with him being an MMA fighter. Some people have said it's too boring and too predictable and too normal, but it's 2021. That's kind of the thing these days. It's in and popular at the moment, so I'm okay with that, but yeah, his general look, his general design, it is not doing it for me. I mean, hey, he's another blonde character, and nothing against blonde characters, but he is, and I am not kidding you, the 16th blonde character in this cast. Not in the cast of Street Fighter, I mean the cast of Street Fighter 5. By the time he is released, 35% of the cast of this one game is going to be blonde. 10%, that's nothing. 20%, that's a coincidence. 35%, someone on your staff has an obsession. I mean, 16 blonde characters? I don't know if I can name 16 blonde people I know in real life. And B, while we're talking about his hair, holy crap, who designed that and said, yeah, that's good, put it out there. He looks like a 90s spokesperson for string cheese. This dude combs his hair with a spaghetti strainer. So while I will admit, I think his gameplay looks alright, design-wise, the only thing that makes him stand out in this sea of blonde characters is that he has the worst haircut of this entire franchise. And I'd like to remind you that these characters exist. And hey, I know that some people do like the guy so far, and they are interested in seeing what Capcom has in store for Luke, but as I said, Street Fighter 6 is already off to a rocky start based on behind-the-scenes reports, and this is the guy who is supposed to get us hyped for Street Fighter 6, and so far, yeah, I mean, hey, that's not terrible or anything. I mean, it's not like DiCaprio bad or anything. It's still about 50%, but when you look at it compared to most other character reveal trailers, yeah, that is way more downvotes than Capcom was probably expecting. So, now that I've established what our problems are with the hints and clues we've gotten about the next Street Fighter, what is our premise for Street Fighter 6? What are we going to do different? Well, as you can tell from how many times I've brought up, yes, we will finally be moving past Street Fighter 3. Way past Street Fighter 3. It is time to finally do what Tekken did, what Mortal Kombat did, what Soul Calibur did. Okay, maybe not that last one, but what every shonen anime does after a couple hundred episodes. We're doing a time skip. This is Street Fighter 6, so to mark the occasion, the story of this game will take place 6 years after the events of Street Fighter 3. And we will indeed have a brand new protagonist, but won't be this guy. No, jumping ahead by 6 years is one heck of a gamble. So to try and soften that blow and help Capcom feel safer about this decision, our new protagonist will be a character who has been ingrained in the Street Fighter world for generations now. Sakura. I don't know why I tried to act like that was a surprise. She's on the title card, you all saw this coming. Okay, hold up, hear me out. Why Sakura, you might be asking? Why should she graduate from supporting character to star the show? Well, for starters, she has a long history with this story. She first appeared in Street Fighter Alpha, which, as I said before, was set between Street Fighter 1 and 2. Meaning, if we're talking about where she fits into the timeline, she was almost there at the beginning. She was hanging out with Ryu back before he met 80% of this cast. And Ryu has always been the face of the franchise, so if we're going to finally pass the torch on to the next generation, there's two approaches we can take. We can either try and separate ourselves from Ryu as much as possible by handing the reins over to someone completely different with no connection to him at all, like we do with Alex in Street Fighter 3, or we can make the next protagonist Ryu's protege, which is exactly what Sakura has always wanted to be. And as of right now, it feels like their plan is to pass things off to a brand new character with Luke, but as I said, people aren't really won over by Luke just yet. That was a rather... Oh my god, I have to make the pun. It's sitting right there. I have no choice. I apologize, everyone. This is happening. We can't stop it. Here it comes. It was a rather lukewarm reaction.
Boo! You stink!
I deserve that. So, if you want to refresh people's excitement, you need to make the new protagonist a popular character. Well, lucky for us, a few years ago, Capcom themselves held a poll to find the most popular Street Fighter character, so let's just take a look at that and see who's at number 1, and oh hey, look at that, it's Sakura. Yeah, I'll gladly admit, I like Sakura, but I am actually shocked to see her at the top. But, hey, numbers don't lie, they put it to a vote and Sakura is the winner. So if that many people love her, hell, just make her the new star. It makes sense from a story perspective, it makes sense in relationship to Ryu, and it makes sense for the fans. Also, I'll be honest with you, this is another one of those instances where they were setting some stuff up for the future in Street Fighter V, and yeah, I just didn't enjoy what they were saying up. In Sakura's story in 5, she basically decides that she doesn't enjoy fighting anymore and she wants to settle down and have a family. And don't get me wrong, there is nothing wrong with having your character want to settle down and have a family. I mean, heck, that was Guile's entire win quote in Street Fighter 2. And there is nothing wrong with a character in your fighting game to decide that they want to retire from fighting, that they want to walk off into the sunset. Those are both totally valid directions to take your character. And I know that some people will say that I'm reading too much into this and that there's nothing that says that Sakura can't still be a Street Fighter. I mean, heck, we already have multiple other characters in this franchise who are parents, so yeah, she could totally keep fighting in these games. But yeah, this really had a sense of finality to me. Like, she was done. Maybe it was a translation thing, maybe as I said I'm just reading too much into this, I don't know, but as someone who always thought Sakura could be a bigger figure in this world and loved her passion for fighting, to hear that she doesn't really enjoy it anymore was like hearing Batman say he doesn't enjoy brooding on rooftops anymore. It just didn't sit right with me. And I don't think I'm alone on that, because... Okay, how can I phrase this delicately? This game was headed up by Yoshinori Ono, who had a unique way of handling the female characters. That's probably the nicest way I can phrase that. And he left this game, starting with the latest season, and since then we've only seen Sakura pop up in Akira's story, and yeah, she's gone right back to wanting to fight everyone that she meets, so I think it's safe to say that Capcom has already hit the big undo button on that plot point. But how do we get to this point? How do we take Sakura from here to here? Let's start the game story mode right after Street Fighter 3, and Ryu is returned to Japan after having trained with Oro. Sakura, on the other hand, just got fired from her job at the arcade after she beat up someone who was bullying the other customers, letting us know that she's willing to stand up for others, and that even though she's been trying to hold down a regular job, fighting is still her passion and maybe she isn't cut out for the 9-to-5 life. Sakura ends up running into Ryu and the two of them have a chat, catching up on what they've been up to. Ryu says that he's returned to Japan to go back to his master's old dojo because he feels lost. He's faced down his own demons, defeated the strongest opponents he can find, trained with the oldest, wisest masters on earth, but he still feels like he's not complete. This has always been the curse of the martial artist. You must always search to improve yourself and move forward, but he's now reached that point where he doesn't know what his next step should be. Sakura says she can relate. She feels lost too. She wants to keep training, but it's kinda hard to do that and hold down a job and pay her rent. Which was something that they brought up in her story mode as well. She didn't really know what she wanted to do with her life, and even though, as I said, I wasn't a fan of the choices that they took with Sakura, I do like the idea that she's saying, I need a change, and trying to live a normal life just isn't working for me. So she asks if she can tag along, hoping that as Ryu searches for his answers, maybe she'll find a few of her own. So they hike their way into the mountains and Ryu enters his old dojo, where after opening the door, he instantly gets a flashback of the night he found his master dead, murdered in cold blood by Akuma. And yes, I know that was later revealed that he somehow survived, but Ryu still found the guy who practically raised him in a big splatter of blood and thought he was dead. That's still going to leave an impact on you. But he gets this vision, this flashback of that horrifying night. He's lost in that moment. But then Sakura asks him if everything is okay. He looks back to her, then looks back at the room, and it looks fine now. The vision is gone. It's then that Ryu gets a flash of inspiration. He had traveled the world searching to answer the questions, how do I grow stronger? What do I do with this strength? And now he didn't know what he should do next. But maybe this was the answer. He knew that he would never be able to see everything the world had to share with him. He was never going to learn every single lesson there was to be learned. But maybe that's not the point of all this training. Maybe the point of his journey, the point of amassing all this knowledge, was to pass it on. To take his teachings and all that he had learned and now make sure that that lived on. Maybe he had learned as much as he could as a student, and now it was time for him to become a teacher. He did mention in Sakura's story that he couldn't take on a disciple until his training was done, but maybe that's why he felt so lost lately. His training was finally done. That didn't mean he was done learning. No, Ryu was a character who would always keep learning and trying to push himself ahead, but maybe he had learned all that he could as a student, and now it was time to see what he could learn as a teacher. And after his run with Gil and meeting the young wrestler Alex, he had begun to realize that maybe it was time for a new generation of heroes to rise up. He wipes some dust off the walls, turns to Sakura, and asks if she'd finally like to become his pupil. Up until now, she had simply been trying to imitate him by watching him, and while it was impressive what she had achieved, he told her that it was time for some real training. She gladly accepts, and then we cut to 6 years later. Ryu now has a full dojo filled with many students, and Sakura has reached the end of her training. Ryu decides it's time to test her to see how far she's come, and that leads straight into the tutorial where Ryu tells you to try a string of different moves to teach the player how to punch, how to kick, how to do a throw, how to do specials, chain combos together, and more. And after the player successfully pulls off each of these moves, Ryu tells her that he has nothing left to teach her, and it's time for her to set out on her own journey of discovery. And that is how we set up our story mode. So that's how we introduce Sakura as our new protagonist, but who or what is our new threat? Well, let's think about what we still have to wrap up. Bison is gone, for good, and not like the last time he was gone for good, no, now he's gone for good. Gil is taken care of, Seth is... whatever they're doing with Seth, I don't even think they know what's going on right now. Oh, what about Nikali? This immortal entity that exists only to consume strong fighters? Yeah, he could totally dissolve halfway through the story. Oh, yeah, that's right, he's gone too. Wasn't he being set up to be like the new big threat of Street Fighter V? How'd they have him just dissolve away before he actually did anything in the story? What even was that? So, who is left? Well, there is Akuma, but honestly, Akuma to me was always a very personal story for Ryu. He's not the villain who drags the entire world into a massive battle requiring the strongest warriors to join together. No, he's the guy who Ryu has to deal with one-on-one. So I'd say we bring him back, but not as the main threat. You'll see what I have planned for him later. So, who's left? Well, even though I did say I hated what was being set up in Rose's storyline, I was talking specifically about the time travel. The idea of G being the herald of some dark evil force? Okay, that's something we can work with. Now, I will admit that some Abraham Lincoln looking dude who got popular on YouTube being the messenger of doom does sound a little bizarre even by this series standards. Then again, I have been working on this site for a couple of years now, so I'm sure that if there was a messenger of doom that was going to bring destruction to the whole planet, it would be someone from YouTube. However, even if I am a little bit nervous about that, here's the thing. G isn't alone. He's not the first mystery character with a questionable motivation whose name is only one letter. Yes, I'm talking about Q, the silent robot man from Street Fighter 3 who... yeah, we still don't really know anything about. Just that the authorities are looking for him, and it felt like he might be up to no good. And I've heard theories that G is actually Q, that the two of them are the same guy, and that after Street Fighter V, G went on to take on the identity of Q, and yeah, I'm not buying that. I don't care if the Street Fighter devs themselves say it's true, I refuse to believe that. G can summon out the power of the earth, has a swagger to his movements, and never shuts up. Q can't talk, walks like a robot, and his powers include beating the crap out of people. These two are totally different people. So I say the big threat of Street Fighter 6 is whoever these two are working for. Looking at G's alternate costume, we see he's got one that looks like it came straight out of the 1900s, so I'd say make the villain an immortal who has spent centuries building up an army of soldiers they blessed with some kind of power in exchange for their undying loyalty. Think of them kind of like Apocalypse from the X-Men, and these fighters are their horsemen. and each of their special agents serve a different purpose. Q specializes in reconnaissance and espionage, so much so that he's completely sealed away his face and voice so no one can identify him, and G specializes in, for lack of a better term, publicity, winning the hearts and minds of the world so they'll accept their new ruler when they arrive. Hence why he's making himself out to be the president of the world and shaking hands with world leaders and gain millions of views on YouTube. This guy is covering all the popularity bases. So that's our new villain, whoever is behind G and Q. To make things simple on ourselves, let's just call them Z. They've already been set up, it's one of the last dangling unanswered plot threads, and since all their minions are named after the alphabet, there's 23 other characters that we could invent just for their team. Heck, if you go with the X-Men style Horseman of the Apocalypse approach to these minions, we could even bring back some older characters from Street Fighter and give them a makeover to make them one of their new super-powered minions. Imagine Z has two mysterious right-hand figures at their side throughout the story mode, then at the very end it's revealed they're Gil and Urien, now under Z's control. Or it's Poison and Hugo, now supercharged with boss level powers. Or have one of the heroes get controlled halfway through the story for the all is lost moment. I mean, Ken already got turned into Violent Ken, Ryu got turned into Evil Ryu multiple times, have Chun-Li get turned into Shadow Lady, a hidden fighter from the Marvel games, and now we can turn that character into a Ken figure in this universe. Or if you're worried about upstanding the fans by changing around and apocalypsifying some of these favorite characters, get some of the old forgotten characters from Street Fighter 1 like Mike or Joe who were never playable. I know someone might be thinking right now, hold up, in Oro's story mode they said this oncoming apocalypse was basically Bison's will, whatever was the true source of psycho power. Well, one, that's another plotline I'd be fine with ignoring because as I've said, I'm kinda done with Bison. We had Bison, Bison's robot clone, and Bison. If Street Fighter 6 is Bison's ghost, I might just rip out what's left of my hair. And two, if you really want to keep that plotline around, just say that Z was the original psycho power user. The evil power that Bison sought after, it was created hundreds of years ago by Z. I mean, heck, we know that Bison used psycho power to brainwash his followers, and Z uses their power to enhance and brainwash their followers. You could still keep this storyline around and it would totally fit with what I've already pitched. But there, that's our protagonist, that's our new villain, they're trying to take over the world and they've got a whole army of alphabet agents at their disposal. The story is good to go. Which brings us to the next thing that we have to discuss, the roster. Yes, as I said, we have a show on this channel where we take hypothetical games and break down our dream rosters for them, but this isn't that show, so I'm not going to cover every character in depth. Mostly because a huge chunk of this roster would now be brand new characters, but we will hit up the big ones, talk about the characters I would love to see return, brainstorm some new ones that we could introduce, and most importantly, discuss some of the changes that the returning characters could have gone through during the time skip to make even the old characters feel fresh. I'd say for this roster we go with 25 characters because that's how many characters Street Fighter 4 launched with, and while I understand sometimes you have to go lower, you can't just keep increasing the size of your roster with every single game, eventually you are going to have an installment where you have to drop that number down. But damn, Street Fighter 5, you didn't have to drop it down that much. Yeah, Street Fighter 5 launched with 16 characters, meaning even if you bought the season pass for an extra $30, you still wouldn't have had as many characters as Street Fighter 4 launched with. So yeah, we're going to go back up to 25 to try and recapture some of that Street Fighter 4 magic. We already got Sakura, but we'll also include Ryu, who would definitely keep that beard that he was rocking in his alt costume from the last game, but now his gi would be a little bit nicer. He always used to have really tattered clothes to imply that he was walking the entire earth by himself to learn as much as he could. But now he's settled down, he's got students that he has to lead, he does need to look a little bit more presentable. Also in terms of gameplay changes, remember, at the end of Street Fighter 3, which as far as the story goes was the last time that we saw Ryu, he was now trained under Oro, so maybe we could give him one or two brand new moves that he's never had before to show that he learned a couple tricks from this old master. Let's also include the other two big faces of Street Fighter, Ken and Chun-Li. I feel like even if we're moving on to a new generation, Ryu, Ken, and Chun-Li always need to stick around. But again, they are a little bit older now, so their designs are going to reflect that. Ken will have gone on to start running the Masters Foundation. He's been avoiding that responsibility for way too long and he's all out of sick days. Time to actually show up for work. So have Ken's red gi be his alternate costume. But for his main costume, it's a button-up shirt with rolled-up sleeves, kinda like he just walked out of a boardroom meeting and now he's ready to throw down. And as for Chun-Li, I still think that her classic costume works pretty well, but maybe we could make it look a bit more fancy, a little bit more elegant to show that she's more refined in her older age. Well, I say older age, but it's only been 6 years. It's not like this is a massive time jump, but I wouldn't mind some signs of aging on these characters, like give Ryu a little salt and pepper in his temples, something like that. And speaking of Chun-Li, that brings us to our first brand new character, Lee Fin. Yeah, you might know Lee Fin as the character that Chun-Li rescues from Urien and Gil at the end of Street Fighter 3, but in Street Fighter 5, they add some more depth to their relationship, saying that Chun-Li originally found her as a hostage for Shadowloo. And I think Capcom is trying to imply that Chun-Li adopted her. Maybe I'm reading too much into that, but it is confirmed in 3 that she did go on to be Chun-Li's student, and Chun-Li has rescued her twice now, so they've known each other over the course of several years. They definitely have a very close bond. So if we did a time skip, then Lee Fin would now be about as old as Sakura was when she first appeared in Alpha, which is kind of what I'm picturing here. Lee Fin would basically be Chun-Li's own Sakura, her teenage superfan. Listen, there have been so many characters in Street Fighter who have fought like Ryu. Let's give Chun-Li at least one character who fights similar to her. Plus, as I said, maybe we could do something in the story where Chun-Li gets kidnapped and taken over by the villain. Well, as I said, Lee Fin has been rescued by Chun-Li twice. It would be great for the story if Lee Fin now went charging into danger in order to save Chun-Li for a change. Heck, maybe if Chun-Li does end up getting taken over by the villain and getting turned into Shadow Lady, it would be great to see her fight Lee Fin, and it's this battle that causes Chun-Li to return to her senses and break free of the villain's control. We could also include a few new protege characters. Have a young Muay Thai expert who trained under Sagat. I know we already have Adon who was trained by Sagat, but Adon was kind of an a-hole, and since then, Sagat has actually gone on to find peace, so maybe his new protege can be someone more positive and respectful to reflect Sagat's new life. Also, I'd say that Gao can go on and retire. His whole mission was to take down Bison, and with 5 that was finally accomplished, and he even got to have a nice moment with Nash again, so it kind of feels like his story is done. But he does have a daughter, so imagine if she was now a special agent who studied under not just her dad, but also under Cammy, and now played like a combination of the both of them. Spiral arrows that can cancel into flash kicks, I'm having nightmares about already. As for one of the darker new characters, in Street Fighter V, Ryu finally conquered the evil that was inside of him that he'd been fighting against for so many years. Off-screen. Yes, the main threat Ryu had been fighting against for like 3 generations just resolved. Off-screen. Wow, that's, just the best storytelling right there. Way to go, Street Fighter V story mode. You did again. So yes, evil Ryu is no more, but as I said, Ryu could have multiple brand new students. So let's say that he takes on one pupil because he could sense something dark inside of him. Something that he fought against for years himself, and he knows it well. Yeah, let's have a young pupil under Ryu who is the new host of the Satsui no Hado. But he's younger and hasn't received the years of training that Ryu has, so he has a far harder time of keeping all that in check. Think of him as being like Jin from Tekken if Devil Jin wasn't an alternate character, but instead just a form that Jin went into whenever he performed special moves. Also, while we're talking about new characters, let's just go ahead and bring in King Cobra. For anyone who doesn't know, King Cobra was a character who was designed to be a total badass martial arts master for Street Fighter 4. And then Ono and his crew got their hands on him and turned him into this.
You fought the rest, now try to back!
I'm not kidding, this was real. This was the initial design for Rufus, and Ono said, yeah. Let's make him a walking punchline. Also, make him white and blonde because this is Street Fighter and we don't have nearly enough white blonde guys. So let's just go ahead and make King Cobra a character already, and to make it up to everyone, let's have his arcade intro start with him beating the snot out of Rufus and then walking away from him, never to be heard from again. But as for the returning characters, there are actually a ton of younger new generation style characters who would be great to see take center stage after this time skip. First character we have to bring back is Makoto, a massive fan favorite character. Have her come back and have her still be a short firecracker, but she looks even rougher and tougher, like she's been training non-stop for 6 years now. Like, maybe she's got a big kick-ass scar across the front of her face. Something that just screams, I can't stop punching people. And her struggling, collapsing Rindokan Dojo is now one of the biggest martial arts schools in Japan. Have Ibuki return, but now instead of being a ninja in training, she spent the last few years training with Zeku, who, as we saw in his ending, would go on to found the group of ninjas that would become the Striders. So let's give Ibuki a long red scarf and lift some of Strider Hiryu's moves from the Marvel games. We could also bring back Rashid and Minot, two new characters who were great additions to Street Fighter V. I like the idea that since the last game, the two of them now act more mature and dignified. Until something goes wrong, and then it's shown that they're both still the exact same huge dorks that they were in the last game. And by the way, I say the phrase huge dorks with 100% love. I thought these two had a perfect level of jokiness to them in the last game, and we are not going to lose that. Also, we know that Capcom wants Luke to be important to the future, whatever that means. And even if I'm not won over by him yet, he does have some fans. There are some people who are excited for him, so okay, let's keep him around, let's workshop this a bit. For starters, I think the MMA thing is fine, but it could be spiced up a little bit. And then there's that hair. So yeah, there's definitely a few things we can work with here. There's the rumors going around, as I said, that he's Captain Commando, and you know what? Captain Commando comes from the future, we're doing a time skip here, it could totally work. So let's say that after he pops up in Street Fighter V as a professional MMA fighter with flaming gun arms, he then gets scouted by Mike Hagar, who says he's putting together a team to try and protect Metro City, which is where the Captain Commando games took place, and it was implied in Lucina's story that Hagar was doing something secretive behind the scenes. So, Lucas spent the last several years training to become the new hero of Metro City, and he's not in the full-blown sci-fi Captain Commando uniform just yet, but he does have the gloves, he's got the glasses, he's fixed his hair, and now he's got a few new Captain Commando style moves mixed in with what we've already seen in his trailer. In fact, speaking of Metro City and Hagar, this is a good enough time as any to bring this up. You notice that Zangief isn't in this roster so far. That's because, as I said, we're moving on to the next generation, and I'm being serious about that, so a lot of big names from the previous games are gone. Which means that we now need a new big grappler. So let's give Hagar a protege, someone that he taught all of his wrestling moves to be Luke's partner. And while we're on the topic of Luke, let's discuss one of the other Street Fighter V DLC characters, Akira. We have to bring in some more Rival Schools characters. Akira's addition is a huge deal, and when I first played Rival Schools back in the 90s, it totally had this vibe that this game was meant to be the Teen Titans to the Street Fighter Justice League. That these were the next World Warriors in training, and one day in the future we would see them in Street Fighter. Well again, time skip. These characters have all now graduated, they're all now older, they are ready to hit the streets and be the new fighters. So let's of course bring Akira back, but let's also throw in Batsu, the protagonist of Rival Schools. I don't really have a lot of notes on how these characters will have changed over time, simply because I would just be happy to have Rival Schools characters back. That's my only note. Bring them back. Also, I have to bring Juri back. This has been one of the most popular new characters introduced in the last two generations of the series, and Juri had insane powers in Street Fighter IV. Story-wise, her cybernetic eye made her a huge threat. Until Street Fighter V took all of that away. So let's say that she spent the last 6 years looking for some kind of an upgrade, some kind of a new weapon, and she has a new cybernetic eye loaded with crazy powers. Maybe she killed Seth during this 6-year time skip, and she took their power source and turned it into her brand new eye, so now she's got her one normal purple eye and one glowing yellow robotic eye. And with this new eye, it means that she would play like she did back in Street Fighter IV again. No more of this I have to charge up a projectile before I can send it out thing. Man, I hated that. Also, speaking of changes that they made to Juri in Street Fighter V, let her be a villain again. In Street Fighter IV, she was a cold-blooded monster, and in 5, she was sort of chaotic neutral. She even helped out the heroes at times, and yeah, no, Juri is one of the best villains Street Fighter has had. Let her be bad. Heck, maybe even have her power hunger lead her to the new villain Z, where she asked them to make her even stronger with one of their upgrades. And speaking of villains, we would of course have Z on the roster, and the other two special agents that I mentioned would constantly be by their side. They're two strongest fighters who are there to sort of be the mid-bosses of the game, the characters that you have to fight right before you fight the boss. And then obviously G and Q would be returning, which means that we only have 2 spots left. And both spots will serve the same one purpose. Rivals. Yes, what would Ryu be if he didn't have Ken? So if Sakura is our new protagonist, she needs to have her own rival, and luckily, she comes with 2 characters who would be perfect for the role. Karin and Sean. Yes, Karin and Sakura were rivals back in Street Fighter Alpha 3, and they were a great pair, the spunky interjack rough and tumble tomboy, and the snooty elegant rich heiress. Total opposites, and that made them clashing so great. And since then, their rivalry has died down, they've become close friends, but I do like the idea that when Karin sees how much stronger Sakura has become over the past 6 years, she'd instantly want to test her skills to see who's come the furthest. And of course, if Sakura is Ryu's protege, then we have to include as her second rival, Ken's protege, Sean. When last we saw Sean, he was just starting his training, but now 6 years have passed and he's come a long way. He'd fight similar to Ken, but I'd say let him keep his roll and tackle moves to help him feel different. And here's my craziest idea for him. Remember how in Street Fighter 3 the joke was that he could only fire out Hadouken as his big special because what was a normal move to everyone else was the super move for him? Maybe he still can't fire out a normal Hadouken, which would again keep him from being just another Shoto character. And he would still only be able to fire it out as a super move, but it would now be the most powerful projectile in the entire game. Like in Street Fighter 3, Sean could only fire out Hadouken if he put all of his effort and power into that one blast. So maybe over the past 6 years, he kept training with that mentality, so now he still couldn't fire out a normal fireball, but instead, when he did shoot it out, it was now this massive MVC-style stage-clearing blast. And for anyone who thinks that Sakura shouldn't have 2 rivals, remember I said that the big villain Z would have 2 super-powered bodyguards? Imagine a scene in the story mode where Sakura has to race to stop the big villain, only for their 2 henchmen to step in and stop her. But then as it looks like all hope is lost, Sean and Karin run in and take 1 henchman each, leaving Sakura to challenge the big boss herself. Listen, the scene just writes itself. She needs Sean and Karin at her side. Plus, if I think of 3 characters from this franchise who just screamed the next generation of heroes, it's Sean, Karin, and Sakura. And that brings us up to 25 characters, same as the number of characters in Street Fighter 4, and even though the big boss of the game would have 2 special agents who, as I said, would be surprise older characters, they'd still play in their own unique way, meaning we would now have 9 new fighters, more new characters than any other installment of Street Fighter ever. And of course we'd add more characters on as DLC, but I'll get to that when we talk about the seasons and continued support. For now, we've covered all the surface level stuff, the faces, the story, but this is a fighting game. Time to talk about how it would play. As far as general balances go, Street Fighter V was a much more footsie-heavy grounded game, which is great if that's what you're into, there's nothing wrong with that. But in order to make Street Fighter VI feel different, I'd want to balance the game to reward aggressive behavior. Let's make the game move about 10% faster, and have your super meter rise about 20% quicker. I always felt like Street Fighter V placed too much importance on conserving your resources, like you had a cool moves budget, and you had to carefully plot out how you were going to spend it. By making your super meter rise faster, that would give you more resources for EX moves and all the other big crazy abilities, so that way you wouldn't be afraid to throw them out there. And speaking of that, Street Fighter V was the first Street Fighter since, I think the second one, where each character would only have 1 super. So now, every character would have at least 2 super moves again. And when I listen to people much smarter and more eloquent than me talk about this game, they tend to agree that Street Fighter V didn't have enough defensive mechanics, so I'd say let's bring back air blocking from the Alpha series, and I'd even implement a new burst style mechanic. If we're bumping up the speed, even by just 10%, it would allow for bigger combos as more moves would now be able to link together. So let's allow players to spend 2 bars of meter to break free of a combo. I figure 2 meters is enough that would force you to have to weigh if it was worth it, but with the super meter now rising faster, you'd still be able to spin those 2, and it wouldn't be your entire cool moves budget for the whole match. And this is a big one. You can ignore every other thing that I have said here, but this one is a must. I am putting my foot down on this one. Let's significantly reduce the build-up speed of the stun meter. I'm not going to say remove the stun meter altogether, it's a mechanic that's ingrained into the very DNA of Street Fighter, you can't get rid of it. But I have never seen a game where people get stunned more than in Street Fighter V. So if it has to come back, then we need to adjust it. Now, even though the burst mechanic would be new, you need something bigger, something that you can advertise as the big selling point of this new gameplay. Street Fighter V had the V system, Street Fighter 4 had the Ultra combos, so we need something big for Street Fighter 6. And I'll let you know right now, as much as it might shock you all, me, guy writing a Street Fighter fanfic here on YouTube, is not a game developer. This idea I have might be crazy and wouldn't work at all, it might take tons of tweaking to balance it out, but I'd want this new mechanic to be one that really leans into the time skip. And typically, the point of a time skip is to see characters reach a new level of power. So I'd say, let's let each character have some kind of a super mode, or a max mode, an EX mode, whatever you want to call it. Listen, everyone gets to go Super Saiyan. That's what I'm suggesting. Street Fighter V had something similar to this, as each character could activate their V-trigger to receive a boost for a limited amount of time, but I always felt the boost you received with V-triggers was very precise. In fact, I'd say that word describes all of Street Fighter V to me. It's a game where everything feels like it only works in the exact right situation, linking into the exact right moves with the exact right amount of meter and abilities activated. Like, you activate your V-trigger, and it gives your character a boost for a bit, but only to one move. But now if you use that one move at this precise time, then you can then link into another move, but only if you have the precise right amount of EX meter. And yeah, it's a game where, as I said, you have that cool moves budget, and you gotta think about how you're going to spend it. I want these new super modes to be forms that allow more freedom, and the boosts are more obvious. The V-triggers basically allow you to do one specific thing, which is fine, except we already have EX moves and V-skills that already fit that same theme of precise gameplay. So when it comes to these new super modes that I'm suggesting, you could still see slight variations to some of your moves, allowing you to pull off new combos, but let's say you also move faster and hit harder. So that way, even the more casual fans who don't quite realize, now A can be cancelled into B, will still instantly see that you've gotten a boost. But the other thing that I would want to see in these super modes that separates them from the V-triggers is purely a cosmetic change. As I said, I think Street Fighter 6 needs to be flashier. It needs more razzle-dazzle. And Street Fighter 5, some of the V-triggers look great. When Nikali activates his and his hair stands up and he starts glowing, great, love it. You can instantly tell that he is much stronger now. When G activates his and his skin turns gold, okay, that's not bad, that's pretty good. But most characters just get glowing hands. If they get anything at all. I mean, it's something, I guess. But this is a time skip. It is all about reaching new levels of power. So when you activate your super modes, let's go all out. Let's say Ryu activates his mode and he starts glowing and his eyes turn white as he enters the power of nothingness state. Batsu activates his super state and his jacket bursts off to reveal his training vest underneath, and now he becomes Burning Batsu from Project Justice, and each of his special moves get a boost. You want to go really crazy? I mentioned maybe Juri got her new eye by defeating Seth and taking their power source. So how about when Juri activates this state, she strikes a pose, and then you see the ghostly silhouette of Seth flash up on screen for a second, and while Juri remains in this state, you hear Seth's voice dubbed on top of each of Juri's lines. Yes, I know these visual transformations are purely cosmetic, they're just there for show, but putting stuff like that into your game just because it looks cool can make people go from, yeah, I might check this out when it's on sale, to, oh shoot, that looks awesome, I need to pre-order this now. In fact, to really sell the razzle-dazzle of these new super modes, I mentioned every character would now have 2 supers again. Maybe you could only do one of them while you were in this mode, or one of them would now have a different animation if you activate while you're in this state, just to make it feel extra special. Think of how in Dragon Ball FighterZ, some characters have supers that start one way, but if you spend extra meter on it, then the super would continue with extra parts and do more damage. So, that is our big new mechanic for the game. Everyone can now go Super Saiyan. I've already used too many Dragon Ball metaphors in this video. They can all go into Sage mode. I haven't done that one yet, have I? There you go, they can all go into Sage mode. And as for the single player modes, we'll of course have arcade mode, because a Street Fighter game launching without an arcade mode, that's crazy! Who would ever do something like that? I will never let them forget that. We'll also take the weekly challenges from Street Fighter V, where you could fight against unique enemies, but we'll expand that to be more than just one-on-one fights, making them full-on unique arcade ladders. The kind of stuff that takes a little bit more time and focus, not the sort of thing that players can just check in on once a week, see what's there, spend 5 minutes on it, then that's it. No, we're going to create some stuff that will actually take some time. And there won't just be weekly challenges, but also daily challenges. We want to make sure that players who don't go online will still have a reason to keep coming back to this game. We have to look at our competition, and when Mortal Kombat introduced rotating towers, the single-player game changed. In fact, speaking of Mortal Kombat, something else that we need to take from them, unique intros between characters. Yeah, I know a lot of people just skip the intro quotes, so this isn't really all that important. But for the people out there who do enjoy that stuff, man, does it get boring seeing the same intros over and over and over again. And Mortal Kombat isn't the only game changing things up. King of Fighters for the past couple installments has had whole back and forth scenes play out before matches. Heck, even Guilty Gear now includes unique dialogue for several characters in their game. This is where the winds are blowing us right now. And yet Capcom, the guys who really pioneered the unique intro animations, still has the same lines over and over again. Yeah, not for this game. We're going to follow the NetherRealm approach here and give each character unique exchanges between each other and a few generic lines that they can use for the DLC characters. Speaking of the DLC, yes, it's time to talk DLC, and I'm not going to sit here and list off a bunch of characters to add in future seasons because that's not the big new thing that we were going to bring to Street Fighter 6. No, again, looking at Mortal Kombat and Guilty Gear, both of them have started upping the Season Pass game and have begun to provide additional story elements along with the characters. In Street Fighter, just as I said with the single-player content, if we want to keep competing, we have to keep up. So we're going to provide with every season of DLC brand new story content as well. We're going to have 3 seasons of DLC, and the main story that comes with the game will be about 5 hours, pretty standard size for a fighting game story mode. But each season of DLC will come with its own mini story mode that will be around 2 hours and will be based around the characters released that season. The first season of DLC will be themed around what's going on in Metro City. As I said, there was something left over from the last game, as Hagar was doing something in secret because something is going down in Metro City. Sorry for saying something so many times, but the game left it kind of vague, so my options are kind of limited on this. And as I said, we're importing Luke into the storyline, so it would make sense to have a season of DLC expanding upon that. Which means that we need a new big villain to cause havoc in Metro City, and folks, I'm going to let you know right now. Get ready to be mad. You're going to hate this. I'm telling you right now, you're going to boo and you're going to boo hard, so get ready. The big villain taking over Metro City is Ed. Yes, I know, I'm mad too, but hear me out on this. I know Ed is not exactly the most popular character. He does have his fans, because every character has their fans, I'm told. But when I look out there at audience reactions, most people have not taken too kindly to him. Heck, I'll admit, even I don't really like the guy all that much. But I think Ed has, and I am not kidding you when I say this, some of the best potential for the future of Street Fighter. But so far, everything they've done with him has kinda stunk. What do I mean by that? Ed was a clone body that was made for M. Bison to transfer his soul into, but he was woken up and freed too early. So he's got M. Bison's psycho power, he's got that mean streak, and his longing for power, but Ed wasn't raised by M. Bison. No. He was freed and raised by Balrog, a guy who doesn't care about taking over the world or magic powers. He only cares about one thing, his fight money. Ed is a character who has the sinister mind of M. Bison. But from the moment he was freed, he was taught, nah, forget all that taking over the world crap, make that money. So, what did the developers of Street Fighter do with him? They decided to make him form his own Shadaloo group to try and do the exact thing that Bison was doing, and they put him in this really dumb costume. Yeah, we're not going to do that. Because when I hear Ed's origin, when I hear what he was raised thinking, and what his powers are, and what he can do, I don't see this guy. I see this guy.
Bring it on. I'll destroy you all.
Yeah, forget just making a new Bison. That's boring. We've had Bison multiple times. He's done. We've moved past that. Have Ed say, you know what? Balrog was right. Taking over the world with crazy super soldiers? That's stupid. I'm going to do this the smart way. So he moves to Metro City, sets up some quote-unquote legitimate business like a bank or real estate firm to be his face to the public, but behind the scenes, he takes over the Mad Gear gang and starts running the city's secret crime syndicate. In fact, let's go the extra mile on this and have the story be centered around the Metro City mayoral race where Ed is running against Cody, and he's currently ahead in the polls. And now the new hero of Metro City, Captain Commando, has to reveal his secret plan to the world before the election. Which means we would get to bring back some Metro City mainstays like Cody, Ed would get a total redesign with an older, gruffer, more threatening voice, as well as some new villains working under him to join the game, and we can introduce some new members of Hagar's team. Maybe bring Alex back from Street Fighter 3, because if a pro wrestler saved the world, you know Hagar would scout him for his team. Next season of DLC would be based around older characters returning, but not in the way some people might think. Yeah, there's another story thread that we need to address, which is that Rose said she was going to go back in time and change history to prevent any of this from happening. And as I said, that was a horrible idea. So for this season of DLC, let's have her do just that. And have it turn out to be a horrible idea. Yeah, make this a what if season pass. Rose goes back in time to the alpha game period, and things go horribly wrong. Guile dies instead of Nash, Ryu gives into the Satsui no Hado, Chun-Li becomes a doll instead of Cammy. Basically, Rose wrecks everything and then realizes, okay, yeah, this isn't going to work. And then it's revealed that all of this was basically a magical simulation that she was running to see what would happen if she did try to change the past. Realizing it wouldn't work, she decides to scrap that plan and instead puts all of her faith in the next generation to save the day. So this season would give us an excuse to bring back 6 characters from the older games like Bison, Nash, Cammy, Rose, and more, but it would also give us an excuse to make new alternate reality costumes for some of the characters based around this story, which would include new voice lines for the characters as well. Again, Mortal Kombat does stuff with their unique costumes all the time, so we need to step our game up. Plus, okay, spoiler for a certain Disney Plus Marvel show, I actually had this idea for this season pass before the finale of Loki and the What If show started up. So even though I didn't get the idea from there, yeah, it looks like alternate realities with established characters being completely different is kind of going to be a big deal for the foreseeable future for a giant major movie franchise. So if that's going to be the popular thing for the next couple years, it does look like everything is lining up for this season. And the final season pass story would be called Journey's End, and it would address one final plot line left hanging. As I said, Akuma is one of the biggest villains in fighting game history. But he's a villain for Ryu. He's not the guy who would set off on a quest for global domination. And as I said, Ryu would now have a new student who is fighting off the Satsui no Hado. Well, if Akuma senses someone at his old dojo is erupting with this dark energy, you know he would cut through the planet itself to get to him. So this season pass would focus on Akuma coming for this student, and Ryu has to face him down one last time. Ryu lost his master to this monster, he's not going to lose his student as well. So they would face off for their final battle at the end of this story mode in the very room where Akuma struck down Gouken all those years earlier. And again, yes, I know it was retcon, so somehow Gouken lived, but yeah, I'm sorry, that takes so much away from Ryu's story. Let's just say that even if Gouken was able to use his own chi to keep his body going, he was on borrowed time, and eventually the damage did to him finally took its toll, and Gouken did end up dying. And yes, you heard correct, this would be the final showdown between Ryu and Akuma, with one or even both of them dying at the end. And for anyone out there who is thinking, you can't kill off Akuma, that means we'll never be able to get him in another Street Fighter game. Yeah, this is a franchise that's already introduced prequels, and our last season pass was based around time travel. You can totally kill off a character and then still include them in your roster. Heck, you don't even have to do anything crazy like time travel. In Street Fighter 7, just have Ryu or one of his students have a nightmare about Akuma, bam, he's in our roster. SNK killed off Geese and then kept putting him in games as a ghost for years. Trust me, when it comes to fighting games, you can totally kill off a character and then bring them back for future games. I've seen it done multiple times. But the story between Ryu and Akuma, yeah, that has been going on for way too long. It is time to finally resolve that. So this season would introduce Akuma and several new characters who would help to flesh out the backstory of the Satsui no Hado. Maybe some ancient monk who holds a lost text about, or let's say Sakura and Batsu want to help Ryu, so they try and find out whatever information they can, so they go to an old friend of theirs whose brother was possessed by an evil spirit, hoping that they might know of a way to dispel the Satsui no Hado, and that's how we get Kyosuke Kagami in the game. But that's it! Street Fighter 6 is on the way, and while we might not know what the future holds, or the past, please God, don't do the time travel story. My point is, we know Capcom is working on this, and while we don't yet know what they're cooking up, it's fun to pretend. As you can tell, I'm a big Street Fighter nerd, so of course I've got my ideas for where I want to see the future of this franchise go, and I'm glad that you guys gave me a chance to share them. Let me know what you want to see in Street Fighter 6. It can be the characters, the plot, the mechanics, heck, even the art style, whatever you want to share. Also, thank you for tuning into the maiden episode of Let's Make a Sequel. This is something I've been thinking of doing for a while now, and people have asked me several times to cover game sequels that didn't feel right for any of our other shows, so I hope that you all enjoyed this. If you did, then let us know other games that you'd like to see us tackle. You can tell me in the comments below or on Twitter at Thorgy's Arcade. And before we go, big shout out to the Macho Pie on Twitter. If you enjoyed the new title card art that we got for this video, or the time skip Sakura design, that was all them. They are an insanely talented artist, a super nice person. They've got commissions that are open at wonderful prices. Hit them up on Twitter at @TheMachoPie. I cannot stress enough what a great job they did on the stuff for this video. Thank you again to them, big time. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to help support the show, just share the episode around the web. That's it. That's all you gotta do. Just help spread around. Every time that I see you guys sharing these videos around the web, it always makes me feel good and always helps this channel. Thank you guys so much. But okay, that's it. We've gone on long enough, so one last time, thank you everyone, stay safe out there, and come back next time.